I would pretend to be okay. It would take all my strength to gather up and just pretend to be okay and say hi. But I know they could look in my eyes and see the emptiness or whatever it is. Your eyes don't lie, and so I knew they could see me, and I'd come back and I'd have a panic attack, which panic attacks were also constant over and over and over, and they're awful. And no matter how long it lasted, it took me days to recover from a panic attack that lasted for half an hour or so. But I took to going to the mailbox at night, so I didn't see any neighbors. That's the only time I could get out of the house. So to your question, folks that are living in the darkness or with the anxiety, you're not alone. And it's not the end. There is help, there is hope. You can come out of it, you do come out of it, and there's a full life afterwards. Understanding it, you'll come to understand it, and you'll see other folks and talk about it, and you'll heal. We heal.
I never give up. I never give up. I never give
Hi
up.
guys, welcome back to Neff Inspiration, a show on YouTube and as a podcast with me, your host, Stefan Neff. Today I've got Dave Mowry with me. Dave is an amazing man whose story just absolutely needs to be heard because it's the story that with laughter and joy that you can change your life, that you can change your own feelings, that there is very much a power that you have, regardless if the last few months or years have been that of darkness, that of mental dis-ease, or indeed really mental illness. It does not matter. Once you realize that you have got a power to change, that you have got the privilege of choice, and that there are certain things that are very much streamlining your path to a better future, then that's power. And Dave's story is just exactly that. Dave, welcome to my show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. Dave, it's amazing. Your story is not so common. It is a story of complete transformation. And therefore it's important that we talk about it. Tell me a bit about the different Dave in the past and how you turned this Dave around.
And I want to say that my story up to a certain point is a sad one, but it's not sad. It doesn't end sad. It comes out happy. So I want your listeners to know that it's not just a sad story. But in 1996, I owned businesses and was successful. My wife and I were happy, nice house, nice home, nice family. And one day I was driving between the businesses under a tremendous amount of stress. The anxiety was overwhelming, and my mind snapped. And it was like a twig snapping. I could hear it. I could actually hear it, and like an electric shock that I could feel. And my muscles in my face went slack. My brain went dull. My eyesight went blurry, and my voice went monotone. And it was everything I could do just to get home, to get in the door, and to sit and just to be, just to hold it together. And that was the story for me for the next 14 years of living in this darkness of depression and the terrible anxiety and overwhelming darkness. And we lost our businesses. We were hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. We were homeless with the kids. So we went through these challenging times. And fortunately, my wife stayed with me, as many other wouldn't have. And she's truly the hero of my story. So that was how I got to the point of the depths of darkness and the depression and overwhelming. I don't think anybody can really know what the depression and the darkness is like unless you've really been there. I can talk about it. I can talk about not being able to talk. I can talk about not being able to the mind racing, the negative loops, just on and on and on, and just trying to just be, just to find some calmness, to stop my brain, to just be. And that's where I was for years and years. I was in a position where it was everything I could do just to be. It was everything I could do to get out of bed. And when I did, if I got to the couch downstairs, I'd just sit And I'd breathe and I'd do everything I could. But the anxiety and the depths of depression were overwhelming.
I've never heard it described so powerful and so insightful. With hindsight, you found stress was very likely a big contributor. How was your nutrition around that time? How were your other habits, your lifestyle around that time?
The nutrition was good. I was getting, well, the sleep as I started to get more and more stressed with the businesses,
Mm,
and the anxiety came and the stress. The stress and anxiety are connected.
mm,
My sleep was interrupted. I'd get tired. I wouldn't get enough sleep. And that is so important to get enough sleep. And me, I
mm,
live with bipolar disorder, manic depression. If I don't get enough sleep, I can feel it. And it's so important to me. But it was the stress of owning the businesses. And I had, at the time, I had three beepers because I had three separate businesses and I was doing this and I was doing that. And it was constant. So my nutrition was good, but my lifestyle was not. I was working way too much, not sleeping enough.
mm,
And as I started, my brain started to wind up. It just kept going. I've been meditating since I was meditating for 40 years at that time. And
mm,
so I'd sit and I'd try to meditate. I'd just sit and just try to let it go and to breathe. And
mm,
but I couldn't. My mind was just racing. I couldn't slow it down. It wouldn't slow down. So I just couldn't get into the meditation.
wow,
It was overwhelming. And then with the bipolar disorder, when I was younger, I'd had my ups and downs, and I'd lived with this. But as I got older, the highs got higher and the lows got lower. And so I had that combination of the mania and the depression
mm,
and the anxiety. And the mania came and went and the depression came and went, but the anxiety, and it was constant.
mm.
It was awful. It was terrible. It controlled my life. Negative loops just over and over and over.
It intrigues me that you describe it like a twig breaking, like something indeed happening there and then. That is quite an unusual description. And but then again, every story is unique. And this is not a pissing contest.
Yeah.
Depression and anxiety are different for the way they manifest themselves in different people. So it's hard to often compare stories from different people. Yet we somehow try as doctors to put labels onto the patterns of behavior and the patterns of feelings that we see in the patients in front of us. It's beautiful how you describe it. And indeed, I compiled a book called Depression Lied to Me,
Mm.
where I had 14 beautiful female storytellers who told me their story of depression and of their experiences. And they are all unique. So therefore, it's so important. There are so many people out there who live in the darkness, who are not even able to define it. For you, it was there like a 2x4 over the head. For so many other people, they're still in the darkness and they just know something is not right. And then when you look at it from the outside, my goodness, what would you tell those people who are still confused? They are feeling completely off kilter. They don't know what's going wrong. And they're just hanging in there by teeth and nails.
I want people to know they're not alone. Oftentimes we go into this darkness, we slide into the depression, and we feel like we're all alone. We look around and other people seem to be communicating and having a good time or doing all these positive things. And we don't feel that and we can't do that. And so we feel like we're all alone. We feel like there's something wrong with us. We feel like we're failures. And I know for me, I would pretend if I went to the mailbox and if I was able to get out of the house, if I went to the mailbox and I saw a neighbor or saw anybody, I would pretend to be okay. It would take all my strength to gather up and just pretend to be okay and say hi. but I know they could look in my eyes and see the emptiness or whatever it is. Your eyes don't lie, and so I knew they could see me, and I'd come back and I'd have a panic attack, which panic attacks were also constant over and over and over, and they're awful. And no matter how long it lasted, it took me days to recover from a panic attack that lasted for half an hour or so. But I took to going to the mailbox at night, so I didn't see any neighbors. That's the only time I could get out of the house. So to your question, folks that are living in the darkness or with the anxiety, you're not alone. And it's not the end. There is help. There is hope. You can come out of it. You do come out of it. And there's a full life afterwards. Understanding it, you'll come to understand it, and you'll see other folks and talk about it, and we'll heal. We heal. It's a wonderful part of the being human and our brain, our body. We heal.
And indeed, time is the great healer. But at the same token, I think time can sometimes take too much time. And to just wait for something to happen, I don't think that this is sort of the most successful way forward. But then again, when you're paralyzed, there's the only thing you can do. Or is it? You ultimately are now a man who is in control, who is indeed out there and sharing his story to make this world a better place. With that, you are the man who's back in the driver's seat, not just the cork that is on the surface of the ocean and is being blown around by the currents and by the winds of depression and anxiety. How did that occur? How did this transformation occur?
I think it's important you can lean into your depression to a certain point, and you can accept the fact that you live with depression or some other mental health challenge or the anxiety, but you can have acceptance without resignation. It's not always how it's going to be. I didn't resign myself to this is how it is, this is how it's always going to be, and I can't do anything about it, and I'm not going to come out of it. So for me, it was taking tiny steps. It was sitting in a different place on the couch, just moving over to the other end of the couch. And for me, that was huge. One of the things that happens, I don't know if you've heard this, but people with serious depression, and I think there's situational depression and clinical depression, and they're different. And the clinical depression goes deeper and lasts longer. But folks that I work with, and for me, I was too depressed to shower. It was just overwhelming I just couldn't. It was just too overwhelming, and I saw no purpose in it because of the darkness. And I sleep in my clothes because it was too much to take them off and put them back on. So, but then coming out and taking one step at a time, just doing something different. And for me, I'd watch the Cooking Network and I'd get out of my head. And so I wouldn't have these racing thoughts and these negative thoughts, these negative loops. And I was learning something. I was doing something without doing anything. And so I didn't cook the recipes, but it told me what spices went with what. And so then when I could, I would fix dinner and for the family and do that. So that was one of but you accept the fact that you have this thing happening to you, but don't resign yourself to that's always how it's going to be. One step at a time. And for me, I just didn't give up. I just tried, kept trying, and I tried and failed and crashed and burned. But I just kept trying and eventually came out of it.
Beautiful. How were the medical people that you sought help from?
It took me years and years and years to get diagnosed with my bipolar disorder. I didn't know what was happening. I knew I had no idea. I had ups and downs, and I had good days or good years and bad years, good months and bad months. The psychiatrists, I'd go in, they'd see when I was depressed, so they could tell when I was depressed. So I got diagnosed with depression, but when I was manic or feeling good, I was doing fine and talking, and so I just looked like regular. It took me years and years and years. There were good experiences and not so good experiences, but over time I got diagnosed, and we worked on finding some medication to help with my illness. And so the lows weren't as low and the highs weren't as high. But I had some bad experiences. I went through a few psychiatrists, psychologists, and some of them talked more about themselves than they did about me, or they didn't ask because they just weren't good at what they did. And so it was a bit of struggle, and that's common. People have those experiences, and it takes years and years and years to get diagnosed with bipolar disorder.
Once you had a diagnosis, I mean, a diagnosis is nothing but a label. Was in the first instance, once you had this diagnosis, was that a relief for you, or was there shame and guilt attached to that?
There was both. A lot of relief. When I was diagnosed, I told some people I said I didn't give up. I kept trying. One of the things I did is I went to the local university and was taking classes, working towards my degree. And I knew the people, I'd talked to people. And then after I was diagnosed, I told folks, I have bipolar disorder. And I just thought I could say it and it would be okay. But then the people that I knew and I talked to, they just disappeared from my life. I'd see them coming down the sidewalk and I'd get ready to smile and nod, and they walked past me like I didn't exist. And this was common. And I learned not to talk about it because the stigma was so great. If people in the neighborhood, there were some people that my kids were friends with, and my kids were young at the time. And actually, my wife told the people that I had bipolar disorder, and they stopped letting their kids come over to our house to play. I just learned not to talk about it. I learned to just not to talk about it.
Wow, that's so hard, isn't it? I can understand both sides, but at the same token, there are so many other broken souls out there. We just don't know how much trauma there is in the people that we speak to. And whilst they're keeping up their own facade, for all you, they might actually be directly in the same darkness or in a similar darkness than you are. And just you being honest about it is putting a mirror in front of their face. And they are running a mile. They try to escape their reality. So that is so common. We see so much of that, even if you go back to ACEs, so the adverse childhood experiences, and look forward from from those negative experiences, how they impact our adult lives. It's tremendous. And we see that the more you had a difficult childhood, the more likely it is that you develop both physical problems in your health as well as mental health problems and all the negative coping mechanisms that go along with those childhood experiences. So nowadays I understand that. But when you're in the darkness and when you're finally trying to come out and actually connect again to people, to then see that they're turning away can be a hard blow. And it is something we all need to go through. That is not everyone who smiles is your friend.
That's exactly right. I spent years pretending to be okay. Just we're talking about pretending to be okay, and people didn't. I hid my pain and my negative thoughts and all these things. And then I run a small mental health nonprofit here, and I see folks and we talk, and there's so many folks that live with mental health challenge that you wouldn't know. You don't know walking down the street, and they just do. But when they come in and come into our building and find acceptance and that other people are living with these experiences, they open up sometimes for the first time. We offer peer support where folks with a mental illness help other people, talk to other people. And so much of it is acceptance. And when people find out they're talking to someone that's been there, they open up. And I've gotten to the point, I've been doing this for years and years and years and been through it. And I oftentimes I can tell by looking in somebody's eyes, their face, and I recognize fellow travelers, and they're pretending too. It was so exhausting pretending to be okay. And it's great not to have to pretend now. And I think part of it is being older and understanding life and I don't pretend anymore. And there's acceptance with lots of people. Other people, there's never going to be acceptance. And that's just the way it is. But I can live with that. And like you said, you've got friends, but sometimes they just disappear from your life. And they really weren't friends. I worked with people when I did get a job, part-time, 12 hours a week, minimum wage at a department store. And I met people that I worked with, talked to people, and when somebody left, they'd get together and have a little going away thing. And then when I left, there was no going away thing. There was no goodbye. It's been great to know you, whatever. I just wandered off, and I realized that I was seeing things that weren't there. I was thinking that I was building relationships, but they weren't happening.
Intriguing.
So that's that. Starting in 2010, I got a job at the local National Alliance on Mental Illness affiliate and started working part-time. That was after the department store. Working at the department store, I worked there for a year at 12 hours a week for minimum wage. And working there, I tried so many other times, and I'd crash and burn in so many other experiences, but this time I was able to do it for a year, and it's amazing. It was a huge accomplishment.
I know.
Just
I was about to say, this is such a beautiful achievement. How did you hold on to that? How did you do that? What was different in that setting compared with other settings?
I was just a little healthier. I
Right.
wasn't as deep in my depression and overwhelmed by my anxiety and having the panic attacks.
Mm.
And then I'd still have panic attacks. I'd be driving down the road. We owned restaurants, and I'd drive by a restaurant that was similar to the ones we owned. And I'd start to fill up with anxiety and the memories of the loss and the pain and go back to those dark days and have a panic attack.
Ah,
And I had those. It's interesting. So I was just in a better place, and I was able to do it, and it was a huge accomplishment. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but I kept going back, like, one step at a time, just not resignation, and just do it one more time, one more day. And we used to have luxury cars that had lots of money. We were doing well. And I was walking a mile from, we were living in some people's basement. And the kids slept in an alcove under the stairs, and Heather and I had another room with the door. But I'd walk a mile to the bus stop and ride the bus downtown to go to work. And there were lots of each one of those things was, I felt people, man, I don't, those were huge accomplishments. Those were huge successes. I remember getting on the bus the first few times and looking around at folks and I'm thinking, that's not me. And that's kind of a story that went along. I'd see other people that were having challenges and thinking, that's not me, that's not me. And when I was in the hospital, in the psychiatric unit, I looked around and thought, that's not me. And then at a certain point over time, that is me. I am those folks. I may have better clothes or whatever it is and be clean and well spoken to a certain extent. But that was me. And I see myself, I think that's running the mental health nonprofit. That is me. The people that are homeless that come in could have been me. When I was going to Portland State, here at the university, it was also challenging when I was in a class and they'd break out in small groups. And I was fine in the class. I'd sit in the back corner and there was nobody to my right. It was just a wall to my right and a wall to my back and the back of the heads of the people in front of me. And the only person that was there was a person to the left of me, and I never looked left. And I just tried to blend into the wall and be anonymous. And then we'd break into small groups and I couldn't be anonymous. And I'd have a panic attack. I'd start to sweat. And when I mean sweat, I'd drip sweat. I'd soak my collar, my shirt, and the back of my shirt and my armpits. And I just have to, I'd run out, I'd walk out, I'd want to run and escape. I'd walk out and go to the bathroom
yeah.
and just be in the bathroom until the class was over and then go back in and get my backpack. But I had a panic attack one day and went out front, and my wife was picking me up from that particular day, and I had had a particularly bad panic attack was still experiencing it. I sat down in front of a building waiting for Heather to get there, and she was late. And I knew at that point, I knew that if she didn't come, I wasn't getting up. I wasn't moving. I was just spent. I wouldn't get up. And she got there and helped me to the car. And then we were driving home and we drove through Old Town Portland. And I saw people sitting on the sidewalk leaning up against buildings. And I saw people. There were obviously, challenges, and they were, in single room occupancy hotels. And looked at them and I could see in their eyes. And I said, me, that without my wife, would have been me living in an SRO in Old Town Portland. That would have been me if she hadn't stayed with me.
Wow. That is such a beautiful story that she stayed with you. This is certainly not normal in situations such as yours. She obviously saw the gem that she had married. She saw that beautiful being. And then she saw that the darkness had come over you. How did she, with hindsight, why did she stay? Did you ever ask that question?
We had it. She just had never crossed her mind to leave. So
Wow.
I don't know if you can say it was loyalty or love, or it just never crossed her mind to leave. And she loved me and she cared about me, and we were good together. But I couldn't function. She stepped up. She out with the business and worked with the debtors, the creditors, excuse me, and made arrangements and negotiated, and they reduced some of our, she worked through all that. She took care of the kids. She job that she really hated. She went every day and did it over and over and over. She was a very strong person. Uh, and she's, I'm so fortunate, share the kids. That was one of the hardest things for me. The kids were young, like 8 and 6, and I was really involved. We'd play, we were active. I coached their soccer. I did all these things, and all of a sudden, all I could do was sit on the couch. Uh, but she in all these regards, and why? Just because she's a special person.
You're truly blessed, my friend. You're truly
Mhm.
blessed. When did humor and joy come back into your life?
I worked at the department store and had success of being able to work. I I go to the National Alliance of Mental Illness. They had a monthly meeting, and she suggested I go. And so I went, and I walked in the door, and there was no, doing energy, what's going on, blah, blah, blah. They could see that I was just, needed to be there and have quiet. And I sat in the back, and they were accepting. And I heard somebody talk about their experience, and I thought, oh, that, and then I went back the next month. And what ended up happening, I ended up getting a part-time job with them doing peer support. And they brought in a comedian who taught stand-up comedy to folks with mental illness. And after all the things previous to that, I should back up just a second. The newspaper, large here, was doing, they were looking for someone to do an article about mental illness, and somebody suggested me. And so they did, they interviewed me and spent time with me, and okay, they'll, get the word out and blah, blah, blah. Story came out. And I thought it was going to be a story, ended up, my picture was on the front page and there were 4 inside pages. So there was no more pretending for me at that point. I was out there. So the came in to teach the class. I decided, I do that. When I went into the hospital, psychiatric unit, I came up with a joke. I got in there, my mind was racing. I was in the depths, but I got into the hospital and nobody could see me. Nobody could talk to me. And the shifted, and I came up with a joke. And the joke was why they keep the doors locked to the psychiatric unit, because there's so many people trying to get in. Simple
Exactly.
and silly, but the comedian came to teach the class, and I thought I can do that. And so I took the class. Turns out I find humor in the darkness. the more darkness, the more challenges you have, the more material you have for humor. I had lots of material and I was find humor in it, and I could write jokes and write laugh out loud funny jokes. I wrote jokes for myself. I wrote jokes for other people.
Mm,
And when things really, that was such a great leap
mm,
forward in my wellness.
mm,
About being triggered, having a panic attack, PTSD moment when I drive, those things, I'd hear a song and it would remind me of loss or darkness or
mm,
whatever, or guilt or whatever. And I'd go back and I'd have a panic attack, and it would happen 4 or 5 times a day. And so my neuroplasticity and
mm.
my pathways in my brain, that's what happened. Those were the pathways. But when I took the comedy class, instead of go by that restaurant, and I started to feel a little bit of that darkness, I'd say, okay, where can I find the humor in that? And it changed everything. Instead of as the comedy class went on, and after the comedy class, I pathways in the brain. So when I thought about like the restaurant, we owned restaurants. And so I'd drive by a restaurant similar to ours, and I had to have a panic attack and a PTSD, and it would take me, a day over it. After I took the comedy class and was looking for humor, I was thinking, so I find the humor in that. So I came up with the joke. It's, I see, and mental illness, I see discrimination everywhere. Uh, like the other day, I was driving down the street and I saw a sign out front that said happy hour. I think that's being discriminatory. I think there should also be a crappy hour for depressed people, and bipolar people could go to both. So
Oh, I
instead of
like that.
having a panic attack,
Yeah.
I found humor in it. And next time I drove by a restaurant, instead of going down the darkness, I thought of the joke, I thought of the humor, and my brain. It to this day, if I, chime to me, I look for humor in darkness and challenges, and it me heal so much. It about acceptance without resignation, and we can resign ourselves to this is how it's going to be, but it doesn't have to be that way. Just the simple process of saying, where can I find the humor in that, and change everything. Yeah. And so I started writing jokes for other people, and I wrote jokes for myself, and I was prolific with the jokes, and my jokes, most of them were laugh out loud funny. If I thought something was funny, other people did too. And I didn't necessarily think everything was funny, but if, I thought it was funny, other people did too. And so, teaching the class, teaching people stand-up comedy and finding humor in their lives. And we'd perform, we'd tell our jokes at shows. We had one show where we had 300 people, and there were 8 of us that did the show. And, bombed. I don't know. We've never bombed. And about my anxiety, and God, you're up in front of 300 people and you're telling jokes, and each one is kind of because what if people don't laugh? But I liked my jokes. So what happened, since I liked my jokes and I thought they were funny, I didn't get nervous. I thought they were funny, and, turns out people always laughed. So it was, the evolution into the humor. It's taking that one chance, time class, and then having it. So, humor and my darkness, it changed everything. It helped me heal. I can function. I work with other people. Before, if I was talking to somebody or in an event, I'd talk to somebody. I tried to be the least, in the room, answer with one word, right in the conversation as quickly as possible. And then I'd stand in the corner or try to blend into the wall. And then after the comedy, I could talk to people. And I knew that, I didn't talk much about the mental illness, but I knew if it came up, I could talk about it with some humor. And say one thing that reminds me of one thing to folks that are having their darkness, having their challenges, we tend to run ahead and we tend to want to talk about it. And it's the most important thing in our life. So we talk about it, but we end up oversharing, I hear about your dark days, your challenges that you couldn't eat, that blah, blah, blah. And things I work with people is don't overshare. So I don't talk about my mental illness. It's something that I'm promoting or anything, but if it comes up, I can talk to people about it. I can talk about humor. I can say I teach stand-up comedy to folks with a mental illness, or that I am a comic and I perform in clubs and things, and people are interested in that, and it's helped me, and it's helped. I've seen it with the other people in the class. Tell you a story about Michael. Michael came to the class and he couldn't speak above a whisper. His mom brought him, and they drove a long way. It was 100 miles from where they lived to the class, and his mom brought him, thinking that this may help. He couldn't talk above a whisper. You could barely hear him. And that was the way it was for the first 3 classes. And then we started writing jokes for him, found some humor. And I had him go home and go into the bathroom and look in the mirror and at the mirror. And if he thinks he's too loud, right. And he did it. And then a couple classes later, I had him go into the garage and yell as loud as he could. And he did it. And then he came back to class, the next class, and was talking in a regular voice. And he was talking and he was laughing and he was telling his jokes. And to this day, it's truly amazing. It's very rewarding. It was truly amazing. Here's a fellow that was so insecure, so whatever, that he couldn't speak above a whisper. And now he's out there and performing, telling jokes, going to open mics, and just,
Wow.
living a normal life.
Wow.
That's the power of comedy, the power of humor.
It's also the power of connection, the power of taking action, even tiny, not even, is especially the tiny little steps, you moving from one spot of the couch to the other. That was a huge breakthrough for you, whilst other people think, what the hell? No, for you, it was huge. And I think that is so important. It is progress. It is us being a little bit better than yesterday. How, whatever yesterday was like. There are people out there who are high performing people with mental illness, and they are under such huge pressure. I mean, you're a person running several businesses. This other side where you look from the outside and think, wow, he really got his shit together. When in reality, he is just hanging in there and he is one twig away from breaking. So
Mhm.
we need to recognize that it comes in all the ways. To a certain degree, it's easier to meet someone who is really, really low because you can see that a mile away. If they are still strong enough to hide their real emotions, if they're still strong enough to build the walls and hide behind them, that is the hard person to deal with because you don't even know that they need help and that they so much yearn for connection, yearn for someone to just take them in your arms and hey, it's going to be okay. And you allow yourself to actually go out there by taking action. That's such a beautiful thing to hear again and again. You never resigned yourself. You actually went to the GP, you went to the family physician, to the psychiatrist, to the psychologist. This was all taking action. This was all acts of recognizing that there is help out there and that you should not give up.
One step at a time, no matter how small. And you're right about folks high functioning or appearances, and it doesn't discriminate. You don't, there aren't more, well, folks, there's a high percentage of the homeless that have mental illness, percentage. But at the same time, it matter whether you're low income or high income, the income, and it can, and I read a book, one of the things that helped me a lot, I read the book by William Styron, and he wrote Sophie's Choice. But he was going to Paris to receive an award, and he was just overwhelmed with depression, and he wrote about that. He wrote an essay about it and then ended up writing a short book about it. But he described the depression and how he felt and what he was going through. And I read that, and he realized that I wasn't alone, and that was a big help. Again, I would say, I see, that is high functioning and living with the darkness and, doing their, put step in front of the other, travelers. And it's interesting that we can recognize that we're going through challenges. It's interesting. I would say that I can identify everybody, of course, but a lot of people, I can just see it in their eyes. I can see it,
Mm.
through the mannerisms. Um, but with the humor, it's interesting. If I'm in a group of, say, four people who have a mental health challenge, and we're talking, and we all know that the other person also has the challenges, we start laughing about, time, what we did when we were crazy, romantic, what happened, what did we do, the stupid stuff we did, or how bad this was, or, what failed. And we're laughing about it because, place with other people where we can talk about it. A lot of people don't see that, and part of my thing, I guess, is having lived. People with bipolar disorder, have a shorter lifespan than people without. And so through that and lived a full life, and hopefully have many more years. But having gone through that and being here and being healthy, as an opportunity to get a difference and to recognize someone and talk to someone and open up a little bit and let them know it's okay, know that I've experiences and making it so they feel comfortable talking about it. And so they don't have to pretend. Like I said, pretending is exhausting. But and humor be with people with mental illness, we go everywhere with the humor and the comedy. We talk about everything, and not everything gets into jokes, not everything gets on stage to be told, but we go everywhere. And we talk about darkness. And just about everybody that I've had in the classes or talked with has had suicide ideation. It just, they've thought about it. It's, about how, if we're going to do it, how would do it. And nobody does it. I mean, percentage of people, every side. I had an experience where I was in the darkest time. I was sitting on a park bench by a stream and had the gun in my lap, and I didn't do it. And I can't be specific as far as why. I don't know exactly why, but I didn't. But we can, in classes, we talk about suicide, and we look for the humor in suicide, and we write suicide jokes. And so the next time one gets that suicidal ideation that comes into their mind, they think of the joke and they laugh and smile. They don't go that dark path of how and where and I should end my life. They look at the joke, they remember the joke, they remember writing the joke, they remember telling the joke on stage, they remember people laughing, they remember feeling good about it. They remember shattering I would say suicide is never funny. It is. And I wrote a suicide joke. And part of the writing the jokes, your material, your darkest days, your hardest times, and you look at it. And when I wrote the suicide joke, it was like, and it takes time. It doesn't just all happen in 10 minutes, but it takes time. It's really a challenge in art to comedy and to perform. So I had suicide experience. And so I thought, okay, suicide joke, what now? What a joke does, how you write a joke is you have topic, the subject. And then, so I'm thinking about suicide, for example, I'm thinking about suicide. Well, okay, how am I going to commit suicide? You a gun, that's, set all the obvious things out. And then you say, okay, what's the opposite of that? What's, opposite of this, and what about that? And then you start getting creative. And once you've been through the obvious, start to go into the creative, not so obvious. All this is leading up to my suicide joke. If you're okay with me, it's a light suicide joke. So are you okay with me telling it?
Absolutely.
When we're really dark and I was at my hardest times, I decided to end it all. So I went up into the bathroom and I took a bunch of pills. Afterwards, I called my wife for help. She said there are more pills under the sink.
Ouch. And it's,
She loved joke. She thinks it's her favorite joke.
oh, please. That is,
No,
no, it's
I know.
beautiful and it's so hard and it's so cringeworthy on the one hand, yet it is the sarcasm that works so well. And there is a sarcastic humor out there for many people that allows us to break through the darkness. policemen, paramedics,
Oh yeah.
firemen,
Yeah.
doctors,
Yeah.
nurses. We are all in that league because we have seen so much destruction that we are sometimes a very black gallow humor. And
Mhm.
this is beautiful. This is just beautiful. This is the way I think it works for many people. And someone who is offended by that should be very careful to voice this offense because it is a coping mechanism for many of us. And
Mhm.
you are now part of this esteemed group of very black humored men and women out there who are able to continue with a very, very job. For some of us, the real job. For some of us, it is life, a very hard life, but we can see the humor in it and it helps us. And that's a
Exactly right.
beautiful, beautiful.
Some people I've never had anybody. The only one person that I've had that said anything about the suicide joke was a social worker. And she came up after the show and she said, I don't think you should tell the suicide joke or, the good joke because somebody triggered.
Hmm,
And she was protecting other people. She wanted to save someone else from
hmm,
being triggered, from having some emotional response.
hmm,
And the people who live with a mental illness, it's almost offensive to have someone in the social worker profession or the helping profession to try to protect us, to save us, see us as less than or, vulnerable, mental illness that have been through these things and with it and coming out the other side, or they're capable.
yeah.
They're some of the strongest people I know, and they're capable and able. And please try to save us. Please don't try to protect us from ourselves, from a joke. Some people don't want to think we shouldn't use the word crazy because it might trigger somebody. And it's so silly. Anybody with a mental illness, if you talk to anybody with a mental health challenge, we're crazy. We've all been crazy. We've all done crazy things. If some event where you can't say the word crazy, you can't say the weather is crazy today, or
Oh, please.
so was last night, or schizophrenic. It's not people with the mental health challenges that do that. Folks who listening, we're strong, we're able, we don't need protected. Don't try to keep us from being triggered. uh like it, we don't want it. We can hear the word crazy, we use it, we own the word, and we know what it means, and we're protected from the word
Well, that's
crazy
true.
or the
But
word
that's
manic.
if you look at comedians that are a bit more out there, then there is very much an understanding that if you are a Jew, then you can make anti-Jewish or anti-Semitic jokes. When
Hmm.
you are a gay person, then you can really let rip. As a person of color, as a black
Hmm. Yeah.
comedian,
Yeah.
you can use the N-word. You can,
Right.
there are
Yeah.
certain things that are acceptable. And I go with that. That is a
Hmm.
very permissive kind of attitude.
Hmm.
But it's more important to recognize that humor is such an important part of life. If we look at the positive effects of laughter, the positive effects of joy, all those kind of things, if we can measure that by the release of cytokines or how certain
Hmm.
immune systems will be boosted while other symptoms or systems, shall I say, the amygdala, our stress response
Hmm.
part in the brain is calmed down. It is a beautiful, beautiful thing. So only because you are feeling particularly left inclined, particularly liberal, does not give you the right to say, no, this is a bad joke, you shouldn't laugh about that. I think
Yeah.
it is important to recognize, to put things into context, and therefore it is so liberating to hear you speaking from that angle. And I see
And
that there are many other comedians out there who are taking that on. Comedians who live with cerebral palsy, or comedians who have been severely affected by PTSD. They were soldiers in their previous lives and are now coming out there with some of the most hardest jokes. And they are there for a reason. because the life that they lived or live is much harder than the joke. And therefore, it is so beautiful. Let's use this liberating power, the liberating choice of going out there and actually having a meaningful discussion with the help of humor,
Hmm.
finding a mission, finding purpose. Here you were, darkness, just drifting, and now you're out there, having created this NGO, now being there, actually giving courses on how to do comedy. You're probably not the best comedian that ever walked this earth. No one says that, but you're having a great time doing so, and you're giving hope. So you're the light in the darkness of others and the light in the darkness of yourself. You are the person that you needed to meet when you were in the darkness.
Yeah. Yeah. As with mental health challenges, we tell our jokes and we can find humor in our experiences. We're not making fun of other people. We're not,
Mm.
groups and folks who can make jokes about them and their experiences. And what it does is, it break down fences. It could shatter stigma, is universal. Laughing is universal.
Yeah.
So if we find we're able to, someone in the audience, and times there's a family member of someone with mental illness in the audience, and they get permission through us to laugh about this experience, which they can relate to.
Yeah.
And it the difference if, and the same thing with, folks, stigma. I say we shatter the stigma one joke at a time.
Beautiful.
And that's, what we do. I mean, for me, learning it was healing and really amazing. I would have panic attacks if I got up in front of, talk. I had to communicate. And then once the comedy and started performing, I think it was because I was telling my story. I was being honest. Almost one of my jokes is based in reality. This
Nice.
joke, I was down, it was dark, I did contemplate suicide. And so that's the real part.
Mhm.
And then there's the creative part, the surprise, the difference at the end, which makes it funny. It makes people laugh. Our joke, I discrimination out there,
Mm.
and discrimination in different places. And then happy hour to crappy hour, that's the creative part. And every joke, one of my jokes that I tell is based in truth. And that's what we do in the comedy classes. We truth. We talk about these experiences, and then we look for the humor in them, and start out with the truth and with the honesty
Mm.
and openness and honesty and vulnerability, and then we look for the punchline. Setup in comedy, there's a setup and the punchline. The setup should be as close to reality as it can be, and then have a blast finding the punchline. It's the creative part, and it makes us laugh, then other people are going to laugh with us.
Loved it. Dave, you're an amazing man. Thank you so much for being guest on my show. Thank you for this authenticity, for this humility, integrity, all those kind of things that are often lost in daily life. And here you are displaying it and being a role model for others who were out there in the darkness. And those important people who are living with someone, a loved one, who they are struggling with because they are not performing at their best because of mental disease. So we can all support each other. And humor is such an powerful bonding agent to bring us back together. How fantastic is that? Dave, if people want to know more about you, about your NGO, about your courses, where can they find you?
Couple things. One is I'd like to mention the Gee That's Me 3, which is about the comedy class, and it
Mm.
tells the story of six folks who took the comedy class, including myself, so there are five others, and the experiences and the transformation that happened with us. And the audiobook just came out a few months ago. We've got paperback and electronic
Mm.
and audiobook. The audiobook, we were able to splice in the comics telling their jokes from stage. So it's them
Excellent.
actually telling their joke in front of an audience and the audience
Excellent.
laughing. And so folks who want to look for more information on the humor, enjoy it and read some personal stories. It's powerful, it's inspirational, and it's funny. So, the book is I'm on Facebook, on LinkedIn. So just look for me there, send me a message, and all the messages. And if people want to know more or just want to talk about a humor,
Yep.
it's kind of where I'm at, one at a time, one story at a time, one joke at a time.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Dave, you're an amazing man. Thank you so much for coming onto my show today. This was a very liberating and very insightful thing. Made me reflect quite a bit. We have touched upon some very dark topics, but these dark are so important to talk about. 1 in 3 of us will get in our lifetime a major depressive episode. And we all pretend, especially nowadays on social media, we only show our best side, when in reality, everything underneath that facade is crumbling. And so it's important, let's give ourselves permission to have authentic discussions here between the two of us, but hopefully also around the dinner table, around people. And you might find that friends that you called friends are unable to do so. And maybe you need to go outside of the circles that you right now frequent and actually find new people with whom you can be open and honest. And why not take a comedy class? There are other people out there who are there for a good reason. So who knows? This might be your new tribe that is waiting to be discovered. So never ever give up. Dave, so much. And you guys out there, look after yourself and live with intention.
I never give up. I never give up. I never give up.